everybody. Thanks for coming. Quick bit of housekeeping in terms of how the event will be organised. Unlike in previous years when these panels were 45 minutes long and Q&As were a bit ad hoc, this year they're going to be shorter, kind of an express event where we're just going to have 20 minutes of chit-chat here between ourselves, and then there's going to be 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. So there's a bit more time guaranteed for questions for our panel. The topic of today's panel is the evolution of UEFA's competitions, both club and national team. I'm delighted to invite Gila Onepsin and Nikola Rotkov from Altice to talk about this topic. I think everybody knows the story over the last 8 years, the creation of the Europa League from the UEFA Cup, the creation of the European qualifiers product from the old qualifier games, now the Nations League, and also the revamp of the Champions League. What I'd like to begin by asking Gilo is that one of the benefits that was explained or put forward to federations and to clubs for the rationale for these changes, this evolution, one of the key benefits was revenue, increased revenue. And what I wonder is, at this stage, 8 years into these different changes, are you able to say how much new revenue, how much new money has come into football as a direct consequence of all of these changes you've made over the last 8 years?
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, well, I think we'll probably start with the national team football, because I think that's where the evolution has been more important in terms of structure of the competition and of the product. When we started that project was back in 2010, where I guess everybody in the room will remember that at the time the rights were sold individually by each host federation, and that it was quite difficult at the time for broadcasters to tell a full story, because they had to buy the home matches from the local federation, the away matches from agencies most of the time, and very difficult access to third-party matches in order to tell the story of the qualification. So that was the starting point, and of course that subscribed to the bigger story of revamping of national team football that started, with a view that, well, probably national team football was losing ground towards club football, should not rebalance it going forward. So that was the starting point. It started with the Euro moving from 16 teams to 24 teams, not the purpose of today's discussion, but has been a positive effect, sportingly and economically. And then the second stage was the centralization of the qualifiers, with a few key elements there. The first one is we know the benefit of centralization from the history of Champions League and Europa League. Basically, it's consistent scheduling, consistent branding, one point of sales, that in isolation already create value. Here we added a couple of additional elements, and the key one is probably the week of football, that allowed to broadcasters during weeks where there was absolutely no football on television, and for football fans, you were left with nothing to watch, when you wanted to watch football, of course, to offer during those weeks with nothing, matches of good quality and international level from the Thursday to the Tuesday, which was a strong benefit commercially and for the fans. So it has been very successful. I think we made some calculation at the time where the value of these qualifying matches were about 650 to 680 million, and it ended up generating 1 billion in the first cycle. So the combination of the centralization for which broadcaster could tell the full story, the weekend football, and the introduction of a product for pay TV channels, which is everything else than the domestic match, has worked well. The third stage was effectively the full centralization of all national team matches. There was a lot of federation had a concern with it, because basically we took over centrally the juicy part of the matches, meaning the qualifiers, and the federation had to sell in isolation the friendly matches, which created, of course, less value. So further to many discussions, we came to a point where, okay, we would centralize everything, and we would give some meaningfulness to those matches by creating a new competition. And this new competition is the Nations League that will launch in September next year, where basically teams from the same level will play against each other in a promotion and relegation league system with a Final Four at the end of the season. Again, sportingly and for the federation it's been very welcome, and I must say that it has been very successful with broadcasters that bought into it very significantly. And the value of the rights now, I think for those rights we are today, so we generated 1 billion for the qualification matches. The value of the friendlies, I think we estimated around 300 and 350 million, and we would reach about 2 billion. So another 50% increase. So basically across the 2 cycles, the rights would have doubled. So
is it
that's
possible to give any estimate on the club side? Because obviously the creation of the Europa League was a very significant development, again a centralisation, and we've seen recently changes to the Champions League, which are more to do with the eligibility criteria, which in theory should have increased the value in key markets. Is there any kind of estimate in terms of what a kind of uplift you've seen there?
Yes, yes, and I will come to it.
Okay.
But there are lots of different stories on the club competition, because the product is already mature, especially with the Champions League. And the main, I mean, we made some modification that creates value for the product. You can tell one that was underrated is the qualification of the winner of the Europa League qualification for the Champions League. It's been very successful for Manchester United, and that's given a different image to the Europa League in the UK, where the image was not that great. And you had several different changes. The access list, where well, some more value were given to the bigger markets. The split of kickoff times between 7 and 9, where rather than having all matches at the same time, you have the opportunity to broadcast on one end for the broadcasters and to watch for the fans 2 matches rather than 1. So all these elements have created value in Europe and ex-Europe. But mostly, I think it's the brand that has been worked on for 25 years, the promotion, the product, the evolution, and the way it is sold that is creating most value. And it's the market that dictates. It's the evolution of the market and the competition of the market that has, in large, contributed to the increase. And yeah, I think across 2 cycles, the rights have doubled as well.
On the club side?
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned there bringing pay television more into the mix, both on the national side, but obviously there's always been a strong element on the club side. I mean, Nicolas here as the representative of the pay television industry. Could you just begin with putting a little bit of context as to who Altice is and what your business is in terms of pay television?
So today, yes, some word on Altice. Altice is a telecommunication group created in 2001 by an entrepreneur called Patrick Gray. Today, the group is income of 23.5 billion euro. Is mainly in US, France, Portugal, Israel, and Dominican Republic. Today, we have 50 million subs. We are handling today 25 channels because we believe with Patrick, when I joined the group in 2007 to develop the content activity, we believe that telco and content is going to be more and more working together. So it's why we have developed many channels, and now in France we invest in premium content, including Premier League in 2015, and now Champions League, Europa League, and some other property like rugby, boxing, basketball, and so on. That's some words about. So of course, when the Champions League and Europa League arrive on the market, we look at it, and it was good for us to win this tender.
I mean, you mentioned there, I mean, we talked specifically about France, Premier League, and the Champions League, Europa League. Is it possible to give some insight into, when you looked at the Champions League and Europa League particularly, what your thinking was as an organisation, as a telco, because you made what was a pretty aggressive bid to take that away from the incumbents. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what your thinking was about how that would drive your business across the different verticals?
I think if you look at the content side, sport, of course, it's one of the main. Today, Altice is investing in 3 kind of categories. Sports, where we start in 2007 as a first things in the content side, but also news. Now we handle the first news channel in France with BFM, and we have developed some other channel around news. And the third part, of course, is movie and series, where we have launched last September Alti Studio, which is our first premium channel. We invest also in content in other territory, as Portugal with several acquisitions. And of course, when you look at sports, to drive subscription, you have some big properties, and you don't have so much properties. You have League One, you have Premier League, Champions League, Europa League, and maybe some rugby. So you have 4 or 5 big properties that are stronger to drive subscription. So it's why we start with Premier League, because it was the first property to be on the market in 2015, when we have decided with Patrick to increase the investment in the content side. And the next one was Champions League and Europa League. And of course, especially now with, I think, the competition of Champions League, as Guy Laurent said, since year after year, is really becoming the strongest competition in football, if I put away the national team. Because I think people like, of course, the domestic league, which are stronger, but today I think I have 2 kids which are 20 years old. What they want is to look at Paris Saint-Germain or Marseille or Lyon against Madrid, Barcelona, or the strongest team, because in the French league you have strong match, but not so much that in Champions League you are really the best team in the world fighting together. So it's really a big driver for the subscription. And if you see the audience done by the Champions League the last 2 years, it's between 1 million to 2.5 million viewers for each game, which is not so much that the national team, but just behind. And it's at the same level that the best game like or Marseille, Paris Saint-Germain, for example, which take place yesterday. So you don't have so much property, so it's really important for a telco to invest in the content side to have the best property, of course.
I mean, when a new player frequently comes into the market, they have to sometimes be quite aggressive to establish themselves. I mean, it's often said that new players will effectively pay a loss leader, a strategic premium. I mean, do you feel confident that you can refinance these 2 investments, Premier League and Champions League?
I think there is several things. First one is, I think the Champions League and Europa League was undervalued in France because of the what you have in the press. If there is some deal between Canal and beIN to keep the market maybe under the real value. First point. Second point is the new competition with 2 slots, more big teams, make the competition most valuable that before. So that's second point. And I think the third point is year after year, the Champions League and the Europa League is becoming stronger and stronger. If you had all together, and the fourth point is we get the total exclusivity of the competition, which is, I think, important, because if you see now in France, the competition is split with 2 players, which is not so easy for the subscriber to know where is the game, because the first stage is on one channel, the away you never know. So to have exclusivity give more value also to the investment. It's why to have the 2 competition in exclusivity, I think we pay the right price. I think the best events need to have the best price, and this money go back to the club. So we see that we hope that the French team will be stronger and stronger. We have this year with Paris Saint-Germain a very, very strong team. We hope that maybe we'll win next year. But if it's this year, we take it, no problem. But also with Marseille, with Monaco, which is stronger. We hope that Lyon will also come. So with a good number of French team in the competition with new slots, which double the number of slots, which is not, it's very important for us. We can really tell a story to our subscriber for a full season. And it's complementary also with the other property we have, which has Premier League, which is mainly the weekend. Champions League is, and Europa League is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which is perfect because we cover 7 days a week now with football.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned exclusivity. I mean, France isn't going to be the only market in the next cycle where the Champions League is going to be exclusively on pay television. The UK, Italy, Germany, Spain, the key markets really for your audience and for the value. If we were to go back, say, 2 or 3 cycles, in each of those countries, there would have been a split between free and pay television coverage. Does this reflect a change of thinking at UEFA?
I think it mostly reflects the change of the landscape in each market. At the time, probably there was enough space for cohabitation between a free-to-air broadcaster and a paid broadcasters. One was refinancing via advertising, the other one would substantiate or would push forward the subscription. Today, the market is very competitive in various environments between what we can call traditional paid broadcasters, telcos, OTTs coming up, and there's a fight or a war for subscribers. That's probably what it is. And so the market has led us towards that situation whereby we have a premium property that generates audiences and subscription. And I think there is a fight for this subscription on the market. So the market led us towards the full exclusivity in pay TV because the packaging that we've done actually didn't change much from the past. So the opportunity was still there, but the willingness for pay operators to acquire this exclusivity in order to tell the full story of the competition and be able to attract subscribers is massive, and therefore there is less space than before for traditional free-to-air channels or commercial channels.
Something to add is Altis Group is also is on pay TV side, but is also on free TV. In France, we have a 3 DTT channel. One is the main news channel BFM, but we have also 2 other DTT channels. And of course, we will put some games on the free DTT channel. And I think for UEFA, it's interesting to deal with a company which is also a telco, a pay TV a distributor and editing company, and also a free TV owner, because we can cover all the part of the puzzle with the best coverage and the best exposure for the event, because of course the news channel will offer all the highlight information. We can do live before the event, after the event, talk show, etc. We can put some game on the free TV to attract our subscribers, and we have 5 sport channels on the pay TV which can give full coverage of the competition, and you include digital coverage also, which is important for us.
Do you know yet how many games you're going to show on free TV?
On free TV, we have not decided completely. We will put what is sure is 1 game per match day on the Europa League. It's a commitment with UEFA. On the Champions League, we will see, we will put some highlights. And on the game, I think we have to discuss with internally to see what is good for attracting new subscribers and to give a good exposure to the competition. So we will fully discuss that with UEFA and with the management of SFR in France.
I mean, Guillaume, one of the effects of this movement towards exclusivity is that it's difficult to keep increasing the value of the media rights from pay television at the same time as increasing the sponsorship, because the sponsors need exposure. And when Heineken renewed, they expressed concern about this. When Nissan renewed, they expressed concern about this. How do you see yourself in the future managing that challenge, the balance between continuing to drive the revenues from pay television but keeping your sponsors happy at the same time?
Yes, I think there are several aspects to that question. The first one is for that cycle where we're actually moving towards more pay than ever, we will also increase the sponsorship revenues. a good reason for that is the work that has been done on the brand of the Champions League and the Europa League, whereby the association with the competition is also very key for sponsors, and it's not only about the media value. Of course, it's very important, but it's not only about that. And the work that has been done, it's a traditional sponsorship where associating with the values of the competition is seen as very positive for the sponsors, and therefore they want to carry on doing it. And again, we will further increase the revenues compared to the previous cycle, despite some loss in free-to-air. The second element there is effectively you have to balance. You have an overall picture to look into, and maybe we'll lose some revenues going forward, which we will lose some revenue maybe in the future from sponsorship, which is not clear yet, because these brand values are very strong. But on the other hand, it could be compensated by the TV revenues. The other point, to bounce back on that, I think groups that are mostly paid broadcasters today are looking also to promote the competition. So we have the luck in France that Altice also owns some free-to-air channel where they will push content to further promote the competition in order to create more subscribers. What we see in other markets, and BT is a very good example, where they use social media very strongly to distribute this free-to-air content to promote the competition and further attract subscribers. I think the question longer term for sponsors as well is, what is an audience going forward? I don't think we can limit the Champions League and many other properties to the TV audience on the pay channel, because what it generates in terms of free-to-air, in terms of social network, in terms of full digital exploitation and exposure is very significant, or newspapers or news channel, etc., is very significant, but not taken into consideration when you produce a TV audience report. It's only part of the story. What we need to look at, and I don't think anyone has the solution yet, what is the actual value, what is the actual impact of a competition, and what's the actual viewership. And it cannot be reduced anymore in our media landscape to pure TV audience. And I think that's a work to be done in the coming months and years to make sure that we come with a common evaluation of that, because it has to reflect reality, and the pure TV audience of a pay channel will not reflect reality of the strength of the competition.
Yeah, I completely agree with what said Guillaume, because group like Altice and SFR in France is not only a pay TV group. I think we cover all parts because we have mobile, we have fixed line, we have digital very strong, we have free TV. So it's a complete group which cover Europa League and Champions League. And today we can bring much more people viewing some footage of the competition than a pure pay TV channel, because today we see that the market of the only full pay TV group are very difficult. So I think to be partnership with a telco group, having a free TV, pay TV, digital offer, give a good exposure, and so we can bring money, but we can also bring exposure for the competition, which is what the Uefa is looking for his club, is the money and also exposure. And I think the partnership is one of those.
Excellent. I think that's a good opportunity to open things up. We've got five or 10 minutes if there's any questions from the floor. Have we got a microphone? I think there's a microphone coming, David.
Hi, David Owen from Inside the Games. Two questions. The first one's just a factual thing. I couldn't quite hear, Guillaume, when you were talking about the Nations League, did you say the TV rights, you generated 2 billion euros of value from the TV rights?
Yeah, we would generate out of the full centralization of the qualifiers, Nations League and friendly matches, all together, including some sponsorship element into it, about 2 billion. It depends how you account for it. It depends because you have lots of friendly games. It's not a standard number of matches that are played by each team. So it's maybe about that, slightly lower. But we don't account specifically for the Nations League as part of our review.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. The other thing was also to Guillaume. My friend who's an Ajax supporter and my other friend who's a Celtic supporter really don't like the Champions League because one thing it's done, apart from all the positives you talk about, is basically destroy the competitive balance in Europe. You can only win this competition if you're in one of 5 countries. I think only once in the last 25 years it's been otherwise. So are you looking at this? Are you thinking of ways of repairing this, or do you just not care because the competition as a whole has been so successful? I mean, the market pool is one obvious thing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a very strong shortcut to say that the Champions League has destroyed it, because actually it's the domestic leagues that have done it. It's mostly the domestic leagues that generates the revenues for the Premier League clubs, for the League One clubs, for the Serie A clubs. It's mostly that, and unfortunately Celtic or Ajax, with great brands and great names, are coming from small TV markets, and most of the revenues are generated from there rather than from the European club competitions. So yes, to answer your question on a different angle as well, yes, we're looking into it, and you would have seen that the market pool distribution would change going forward, where the impact of the market pool would be reduced from 40% today to 15% going forward, and the performance fees 40 to 15. Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. I can speak louder if you want. And more value would be given to the performance into the distribution of the revenues. So yes, of course, we're looking at competitive balance. It's very important on the European level. There is no doubt about it. But again, I'm not sure the distortion comes mostly from European competition. It comes mostly from domestic competition with different size of markets.
Okay, well, I've got one or two just to round off. I mean, you mentioned before, Guillaume, about commercial broadcasters not really being able to compete anymore with the pay television broadcasters. Looking forward to a lot of the new players coming into the market, I'm just wondering if we can read anything across from that, because on one hand, you have companies like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, which generally have a free-to-air, ad-funded model. And on the other hand, you have players like Amazon, like Performs DAZN, which have a premium pay TV model. Can we conclude that the Amazons are likely to be more successful than the Facebook if the model of Facebook is very similar to commercial television?
Well, it is on one hand very similar, but they have a global reach, which means that the ad-funded business they're running generates far more revenues than a domestic channel in one single market. So I would absolutely not rule out that in the coming month, those ad-funded platforms versus the pay-funded platforms will come on board. I think the question for them is how much do I increase the viewing time on my platform? And there's not that many options. I think sport is one of the key opportunity, and probably premium properties like the Champions League, Europa League, the national team football are on top of the agenda in order to increase this viewing time on their platform. So very confident that they will be around and be interested to acquire and to spend money, because that's so far not has been the case. So hopefully in the coming month they would become right holders.
And looking forward to Ligue 1 rights, which we don't know exactly when they're going to come to the market. I mean, obviously, I would assume that you're going to be in the market. You're going to be bidding for those, I would assume. I mean, do you see these new players being involved in that? Do you see companies like Facebook, Amazon being a bigger threat than Canal Plus and beIN Sports?
We're always in a market changing quite fast, so we are ready to be in front of newcomers. So each time we answer to a tender, we don't know which are in front of us, and we try to do the best thing for us, not for the others. So we'll look at it as when it will be on the market, and see what is good for Altis and for SFR in France, and don't care which other company will be in front of us.
But the fact that you've got the Champions League, does that put you in a stronger position when Ligue 1 comes to the market?
We're in the position which is always better. It's we acquire new rights, so of course it's easier when you don't have the right and you go in the market to get more rights than if you have it and you have maybe a chance to lose it. So it's always easier. If it's what I say in my group, I say it's easier to come and to buy. When we bought Premier League, nobody thinking about us, and now for Champions League, I say it will be more difficult because everybody know that we are in the market, but we succeed. So we will see. Each tender is a new story, and we will look at it. We are a group, as I say, which is owned by Patrick Day, so we can have very short decision. So I think to be quick and to make the right decision is what we can do at Altis.
Okay, and one final question for Guilo. When you came to the market this time round with the Champions League and Europa League, there was a very public target that was out there. Don't know if it came from Uefa, but 28%, 3.2 billion. You're quite close to the end of the sales cycle. Now I understand. Are you going to reach that target, surpass that target? Is there anything you can share on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure it was a target. It was a minimum objective that we wanted to reach, and yes, we'll pass that.
Okay. A final number, possibly?
No. Stay tuned.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that's, unless there's any final last-minute questions, I think that's all we've got time for. So thanks very much for coming, and thanks to our panel, to Guilo and to Nicolas. Thanks very much.